Too often, people make excuses for toxic behavior simply because it comes from someone in the family. Being related to someone doesn't give them a free pass to disrespect you, to demean your boundaries, or to disregard your emotions. We confuse loyalty with silence, and before we know it, we're tolerating behavior from relatives that we wouldn't accept from a stranger on the street. Guilt becomes the favored weapon of a rude relative. They remind you of every favor they've ever done, every sacrifice they claim to have made, just to manipulate you into compliance. The moment you start standing up for yourself, the guilt trip begins. You're ungrateful. You've changed. After all I've done for you. But let's get something straight. Accountability isn't disrespect. You are allowed to set limits, and you are allowed to defend your peace without carrying the weight of manufactured guilt. Every time you let a relative cross a boundary without consequence, you are teaching them that it's acceptable. You teach people how to treat you. If your cousin insults your career choices and you just smile awkwardly, you've silently said, "Go ahead, do it again." If your sister constantly cuts you off in conversation and you let it slide, you've shown her she can ignore your voice. The truth is, what you allow continues. One of the most misunderstood concepts in families is the idea of boundaries. People think setting a boundary means you're being rude, ungrateful, or cold. In reality, boundaries are the foundation of healthy relationships. They say, "This is where I end and you begin." You are not obligated to endure repeated disrespect just because someone is blood. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to speak up. You are allowed to walk away if your dignity is under attack. Not every relative wants to see you win. That's a hard truth to swallow, but it's real. Your growth, your healing, your confidence, those things can threaten people who are stuck in their own pain or bitterness. Instead of cheering for your progress, they minimize it, mock it, or find ways to pull you back down. Jealousy in a family setting can be subtle, but it's damaging. You must learn to recognize when someone is genuinely supportive versus when someone is rooting for your failure in disguise. There is a difference between physical closeness and emotional closeness. Just because you see someone regularly or share a last name doesn't mean they are emotionally safe. Some family members are present out of habit, not love. They show up at gatherings, offer their opinions, and expect access to your life, but they haven't earned the right to influence your emotions. Access to your inner world is a privilege, not a right granted by biology. Ultimately, you can love someone and still protect yourself from them. Love doesn't require self-destruction. It doesn't mean keeping yourself in toxic patterns for the sake of appearances or obligation. Sometimes love looks like space, like silence, like choosing your mental health over their chaos. The most important thing is to live a life that honors your truth. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace, especially not someone who continually disrespects it. Guilt is often the favorite weapon of a rude relative. It is subtle, powerful, and deeply rooted in emotional manipulation. They bring up every past favor, every sacrifice they claim to have made, and use those moments as leverage to control you. This isn't about love or care, it's about control. The moment you attempt to set a boundary or stand up for yourself, the guilt trip starts. They might say things like, "After all I've done for you," or "You've changed," not to understand you but to silence you. These tactics are not reflections of your shortcomings. They are reflections of their unwillingness to respect your independence. This guilt often ties you into years of people pleasing, where your actions are no longer your own but reactions to anticipated disapproval. You begin to guess your choices not because they're wrong, but because you fear being labeled selfish or ungrateful. That fear is what rude relatives rely on to maintain control. It becomes a cycle. They hurt you, you try to speak up. They make you feel bad for speaking up, and you back down. Over time, you stop asserting yourself, and they get comfortable walking all over your boundaries. It's not just manipulation. It's emotional suffocation masked as family loyalty. When guilt is used like this, it distorts your perception of what's normal and healthy in relationships. You start believing that setting boundaries is somehow mean or disrespectful. You convince yourself that tolerating mistreatment is the cost of being a good son, daughter, sibling, or cousin. But guilt used to suppress your voice isn't love, it's control. And when you give in to it, you're giving them permission to continue treating you however they want. The truth is, guilt should never be the currency of a relationship. Real love doesn't require shame to function. It's important to recognize that you're not responsible for how someone reacts to your boundaries. You are responsible for protecting your mental, emotional, and physical space. If setting a boundary causes someone to become hostile or manipulative, that's proof the boundary was necessary in the first place. Guilt is often the final defense of someone who has no real justification for their behavior. It's a last-ditch effort to pull you back into a toxic dynamic that serves them and drains you. Breaking free means accepting the discomfort that comes with change, even if it means disappointing those who have grown accustomed to you being quiet. Many people carry this guilt for years, even decades, letting it shape their decisions, their relationships, and their self-worth. They bend over backward to please relatives who never offer the same energy in return. They sacrifice their own peace for the sake of keeping the family together, not realizing they're the only ones doing the heavy lifting. But guilt fades when you start living in alignment with your values, when you stop basing your self-worth on other people's approval, especially those who misuse your love. You begin to reclaim your power. You are not a bad person for saying no. You are not selfish for choosing your well-being. If someone is constantly using guilt to steer your actions, they are not acting out of love. They are acting out of fear that they can no longer control you. And that's not your burden to carry. Guilt is a powerful weapon, but it only works if you accept it. You have the right to drop that weight. You have the right to walk away from conversations, relationships, and environments that poison your peace. Letting go of guilt doesn't mean abandoning your family. It means loving yourself enough to refuse mistreatment. It means redefining what family should feel like: safe, supportive, respectful. You don't need to argue or explain or prove your point to someone determined not to hear you. Sometimes the strongest answer is a calm refusal. Sometimes healing means walking away from the people who taught you to hurt yourself for their comfort, and sometimes choosing yourself is the most loving thing you can do for you and eventually for them too. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you let slide. Every interaction sends a message, whether you realize it or not. When someone talks down to you and you stay silent, you've shown them that their behavior is acceptable. When a relative constantly interrupts you or makes sarcastic remarks, and you brush it off with a nervous laugh, you're unintentionally signaling that your voice and feelings can be disregarded. People often test boundaries, and if they meet no resistance, they will continue to push further. Silence in these cases can be mistaken for permission. It's easy to dismiss small acts of disrespect as insignificant, especially when they come from someone close to you. You might think it's not worth starting a conflict over a rude comment or a dismissive attitude. But over time, these small instances add up. They become patterns, and before you know it, you're in a relationship where being treated poorly has become the norm. By not addressing the behavior early on, you've trained the other person to believe that it's okay to treat you that way. This doesn't make it your fault, but it does make it your responsibility to change the pattern. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean being aggressive or rude. It means calmly and firmly letting others know what is and isn't acceptable. If someone interrupts you constantly, you can say, "Please let me finish speaking." If a relative jokes at your expense, you can respond with, "That's not funny to me." These small responses start to shift the dynamic. They communicate that you respect yourself and that you expect others to do the same. Teaching people how to treat you starts with believing that your feelings matter enough to be protected. Some people won't like it when you begin to assert boundaries, especially if they've benefited from your silence in the past. They may accuse you of being too sensitive, too serious, or difficult. This is a common reaction from those who are uncomfortable with change, but their discomfort is not your responsibility. When you start standing up for yourself, you may lose a few people, but you'll begin to attract those who value and respect you. The quality of your relationships will improve as the dynamic becomes healthier and more balanced. You might worry that speaking up will create conflict or hurt feelings, but the truth is, allowing someone to disrespect you repeatedly creates a much deeper damage, both to the relationship and to your own self-worth. Addressing issues openly and honestly gives the other person a chance to correct their behavior. If they truly care about you, they'll make the effort to change. If they don't, then that's valuable information for you to decide how much space that person should have in your life going forward. In families, it's often expected to let things go for the sake of peace, but real peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of respect. Allowing yourself to be mistreated in order to avoid an argument isn't peace, it's suppression. You can be respectful and still have boundaries. You can love someone and still tell them, "That doesn't work for me." Your role in the family isn't to absorb pain quietly. It's to be honest about what you need and expect to be treated with the same respect you give. Teaching others how to treat you is a continuous process. It requires consistency, self-awareness, and sometimes tough conversations. But with every step you take in defending your dignity, you build stronger boundaries and deeper self-respect. Over time, people will learn that they cannot manipulate, control, or belittle you without consequences, and those who truly care for you will adjust. The rest will fall away. Either way, you'll be creating a life where your peace is not negotiable and your worth is no longer up for debate. Boundaries are not disrespectful. They are not a rejection of others, but rather an affirmation of your own needs and well-being. In many families, setting boundaries is interpreted as an act of rebellion or disrespect, especially when you've been raised to prioritize others above yourself. But the truth is, healthy boundaries are what keep relationships from turning toxic. They create space for mutual respect, open communication, and emotional safety. Without them, interactions become one-sided, often leaving one person feeling drained, dismissed, or taken advantage of. People often confuse closeness with constant access. Just because someone is your relative does not mean they are entitled to know every detail of your life, make decisions for you, or speak to you however they please. Boundaries are not walls meant to push people away. They are fences with gates, meant to define where you end and someone else begins. They say, "I will let you in, but only if you respect the space you're stepping into." This is not selfishness, it is self-preservation. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you are not required to harm yourself emotionally just to keep the peace. Establishing boundaries can be uncomfortable, especially if you've been taught that love means sacrifice without limit. But boundaries don't mean you love your family any less. In fact, setting clear limits often allows for better relationships. It reduces resentment, builds trust, and makes interactions more predictable and respectful. If your cousin only calls to gossip, it's okay to say, "I'm not comfortable talking about other people." If a parent constantly criticizes your life choices, you can respond, "I appreciate your concern, but I make my decisions based on what's best for me." You don't need to shout to assert a boundary. You don't have to explain yourself over and over. A simple, clear message delivered with calmness can be powerful. It might sound like, "I'm not available to talk right now," or "Please don't raise your voice when speaking to me." These statements are not attacks. They are expressions of your limits. If someone takes offense to you advocating for your own emotional safety, it says more about their expectations than it does about your actions. Sometimes people react negatively to your boundaries because they benefited from your lack of them. They were used to you being available at all times, tolerating their disrespect, or agreeing with them just to avoid conflict. When you stop doing that, it threatens their control. That discomfort is not a reason to back down. It's a sign that the boundary is necessary. It's also an opportunity for growth. If they care about the relationship, they will eventually learn to respect your space. Boundaries also help protect you from emotional burnout. Constantly being the one who absorbs criticism, mediates family disputes, or sacrifices personal goals for the sake of harmony can be exhausting. Over time, it can leave you feeling resentful, anxious, or depressed. By drawing lines around what you can and cannot accept, you give yourself the chance to breathe, to heal, and to build a stronger sense of self. And when you are stronger within, you show up better for those you care about. Ultimately, boundaries are an act of self-respect. They communicate to the world that you are worthy of being treated with kindness, fairness, and dignity. They are not about punishing others. They are about protecting yourself. If someone truly values you, they will adapt. If they refuse to, you will still have protected your peace. And in doing so, you've chosen something far more powerful than approval. You've chosen self-respect. Not everyone in your family wants to see you win. That can be a hard truth to accept, especially when you've grown up believing that family is supposed to be your biggest support system. But the reality is that jealousy, insecurity, and competition often live right under the same roof. Some relatives will cheer for you publicly but secretly hope you fall. Your growth reminds them of their stagnation. Your ambition reflects their missed opportunities. Instead of being inspired by your success, they see it as a threat to their comfort zone. These individuals may not come right out and say they don't want you to succeed. Their resistance is more subtle. It shows up in backhanded compliments, dismissive remarks, or passive-aggressive jokes. They'll say things like, "Don't get too ahead of yourself," or "Let's see how long that lasts," planting seeds of doubt and hoping you water them. This isn't love masked as concern. It's resentment dressed up as realism. They'll find ways to belittle your efforts or shift the spotlight away from your progress. They are more concerned with preserving their ego than celebrating your growth. Sometimes the sabotage is even more direct. A relative might try to sway your decisions, discourage you from taking risks, or constantly bring up your past failures. They don't want to see you win because if you do, it challenges the narrative they've built about you, and maybe even about themselves. Your success becomes a mirror, and they don't like what they see in their own reflection. So they'll do what they can to blur your vision, hoping you lose focus and return to a version of yourself that makes them more comfortable. The difficult part is that these people may also have moments of genuine kindness. They might still show up at family functions, offer help when it's convenient, or act proud when others are watching. This makes it harder to trust your gut. You start to second guess your own judgment, wondering if you're just being sensitive, but inconsistency is a form of emotional manipulation. Just because someone is nice sometimes doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart. Patterns reveal intentions far more than isolated actions. It's important to understand that their behavior is more about them than it is about you. Their need to downplay your accomplishments often stems from their own fears and insecurities. Maybe they feel like they missed their chance, or they don't believe they're capable of more. Rather than confront those feelings, they project them onto you. Recognizing this doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does help you detach from the emotional burden of trying to earn their approval. You don't need their permission to thrive. You can still love your family without allowing their doubt to direct your life. You can limit how much you share with people who constantly find ways to undermine you. You are allowed to protect your dreams, your progress, and your peace. Not everyone deserves access to your personal victories, especially if they've made it clear they don't want to see you win. Success doesn't require universal applause, just belief in yourself and alignment with your goals. Eventually, the people who truly support you will rise to the surface, and those who don't will fall away or fade into irrelevance. Stay focused, keep building, let your work speak for itself. When you win, do it with grace, and when they can't celebrate with you, don't take it personally. Some people are just not capable of seeing beyond their own limitations. But you are, keep going. Don't confuse proximity with closeness. Just because someone is physically present in your life doesn't mean they are emotionally supportive or connected to you in a meaningful way. Families often gather out of obligation, tradition, or routine, not necessarily because the relationships within them are healthy or fulfilling. You might share meals, celebrations, or even living spaces, yet still feel unseen, unheard, or emotionally alone. Proximity can create the illusion of intimacy, but true closeness is built on respect, understanding, and consistent care. Emotional closeness is not about how often you see someone, but how safe you feel in their presence. Do they listen when you speak? Do they honor your boundaries? Can you be your authentic self around them without fear of judgment or criticism? These are the real markers of closeness. Many people mistake frequent interaction for genuine connection, only to realize later that the relationship is shallow or even harmful. Being around someone regularly doesn't mean they truly know or value who you are. This confusion often leads people to keep toxic family members in their inner circle simply because they're always around. The belief that time equals trust is misleading. You can know someone your whole life and still not feel emotionally safe with them. On the other hand, someone you've known for a shorter period, but who treats you with kindness, honesty, and respect, might offer a deeper, more authentic connection. Closeness must be earned, not assumed based on shared history or bloodlines. Families sometimes use proximity to assert control. They expect you to confide in them, rely on them, or prioritize them over others simply because of the relationship label. But connection without emotional security is not connection, it's obligation. You are not required to maintain emotional intimacy with people who consistently dismiss your feelings, belittle your experiences, or create environments that make you feel small. Protecting your emotional space is not a betrayal. It is an act of self-respect. People will try to guilt you for distancing yourself, saying things like, "We're family," or "You've changed," as if growth is something to be ashamed of. But in truth, you owe closeness only to those who earn it with their actions, not their titles. A relative who constantly violates your trust is not entitled to your vulnerability just because they've always been around. Relationships should be measured by how they feel, not by how long they've existed. It's okay to redefine what family means to you. Sometimes the people who truly support, uplift, and understand you are not the ones you were born into, but the ones you choose along the way. Emotional closeness comes from shared values, mutual respect, and open communication, not convenience or routine interactions. You get to decide who gets access to your inner world and who stays on the outside looking in. It's not about shutting people out, but about letting in only those who bring safety and sincerity. In the end, being selective about your emotional connections is a form of self-care. You deserve to be surrounded by people who value your presence, not just your availability. So don't confuse proximity with closeness, noise with care, or tradition with trust. Just because someone is always there doesn't mean they belong in the closest parts of your life. Choose connection over obligation, and you'll begin to build relationships that truly support who you are and who you're becoming. Stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. There comes a point where your words, no matter how sincere or well, intentioned fall on ears that are only listening to argue, judge, or twist your meaning. These are the people who aren't interested in hearing you. They're interested in proving you wrong, winning the conversation, or keeping the upper hand. They don't ask questions to understand, they ask to criticize. And when someone has already decided you're the problem, nothing you say will ever be good enough to change their mind. When you find yourself constantly defending your choices, your feelings, or your boundaries to the same people over and over again, that's a sign. It's not communication. It's a cycle of emotional exhaustion. You start justifying your every move, hoping that this time they'll finally get it. But they never do, because they're not trying to. They don't want clarity. They want control, and your need to explain becomes their opportunity to wear you down, make you doubt yourself, or keep you second, guessing your reality. Some people are more comfortable misunderstanding you because the truth would require them to change. If they truly heard you, they'd have to confront their own behavior, their own failures, their own lack of accountability. That's a level of honesty they're not ready for, so instead they label you dramatic, selfish, too emotional, or difficult. They refuse to acknowledge your perspective because that would mean admitting they've caused harm, or at the very least, that you have a valid point. You are not obligated to keep giving your energy to people who use it against you. Explaining yourself should be part of a healthy dialogue, not a repeated plea for basic respect. If someone consistently dismisses your words, mocks your feelings, or turns everything into an argument, it's not your job to try harder. It's your responsibility to step back. Protecting your peace sometimes means accepting that certain people will never understand you, and that's okay. This doesn't make you cold or unkind, it makes you wise. It means you've learned to recognize when a conversation is no longer about understanding, but about dominance. You don't need to shout to be heard by someone who is actively ignoring you. You don't need to keep opening yourself up to someone who refuses to see you clearly. Your truth doesn't become less true just because someone else refuses to believe it. Choosing silence in the face of constant misunderstanding is a powerful act of self-respect. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need your approval to keep being that person. It says I won't keep feeding a conversation that only serves to diminish me, and more than anything it says, my peace matters more than your perception. You are allowed to disengage. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to stop explaining and start preserving your energy for people who actually care to listen. At the end of the day, not everyone is meant to understand your journey. Some people will only ever see you through the lens of their own limitations. And that's not your burden to carry. Speak your truth once, clearly and calmly, then let your actions do the rest. The people who genuinely want to understand you won't need 10 explanations, and the ones who refuse to understand you after one never intended to in the first place. You don't owe anyone endless explanations for the way you live your life, especially not to those who have already decided to misunderstand you. Some people are not looking for clarity or resolution. They are looking for validation of their own biased beliefs. No matter how calmly you explain yourself or how patiently you try to bridge the gap, they will twist your words, ignore your intentions, and use your honesty as ammunition. Continuing to explain yourself in these situations is not about solving a problem. It becomes a cycle of emotional exhaustion. It's important to recognize when a conversation stops being a healthy exchange and turns into a performance. If someone constantly dismisses your feelings, challenges your motives, or accuses you of being too sensitive, it's not communication, it's control. These are the people who aren't trying to understand your perspective. They're trying to maintain power over the narrative. They want you to stay in a position of defense so that they can remain in a position of dominance. That is not a fair exchange, and it is certainly not love. You may find yourself going in circles, repeating your side of the story, hoping that this time they'll hear you. You believe that if you just explain it the right way, they'll finally understand, but they don't. Not because you're unclear, but because they're unwilling. They have no intention of meeting you halfway. Their focus isn't on healing, but on holding onto their version of events, because that version keeps them comfortable and unaccountable. This kind of interaction slowly chips away at your self-esteem. You begin to question your own reality, doubt your own choices, and feel like you're constantly on trial. But the truth is, you're not the problem. The real issue is that you're trying to reason with someone who sees listening as losing. They don't want peace, they want control, and the more energy you give to justifying yourself, the more you reinforce their belief that they have the right to judge your life. There is freedom in stepping back and choosing not to explain. Silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's understanding that your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to comprehend it. You are allowed to walk away from conversations that go nowhere. You are allowed to stop defending your decisions to people who only respond with criticism or mockery. The people who truly care about you will make an effort to understand. The ones who don't never really intended to in the first place. Protecting your peace sometimes means accepting that not everyone will understand your heart, and that's okay. You're not here to convince people of your value. You're here to live your truth, even if others refuse to see it. Let your actions speak. Let your growth speak. Let your boundaries speak. Eventually, those who matter will hear you without needing an explanation, and those who never listened were never worth the effort. When you stop explaining yourself to the wrong people, you make space for the right ones to come in. People who listen without judgment, who ask questions without accusation, who value you not because you agree with them, but because they respect your right to be your own person. You deserve relationships where your voice is heard the first time, where your truth is received with empathy, and where you don't have to shrink yourself to fit someone else's expectations. You break generational dysfunction by refusing to play the old games. You break generational dysfunction by refusing to play the old games. Every family has its patterns, its unspoken rules, and its cycles of behavior passed down from one generation to the next. Sometimes it's in the way people communicate, or more often, how they don't. It might show up as emotional manipulation, silent treatments, unresolved anger, or constant criticism masked as concern. These patterns can feel so normal, so familiar, that it's hard to recognize them as toxic. But the moment you begin to question them, you've already started the process of change. The old games thrive on silence and compliance. They expect you to keep quiet to keep the peace, to go along with harmful traditions, to accept roles that were never yours to carry. Whether it's being the peacemaker, the scapegoat, the fixer, or the one who always sacrifices, these roles are not love. They're survival strategies, and once you start choosing truth over tradition, everything begins to shift. The discomfort you feel when you speak up is not wrong. It's the growing pain of breaking cycles. Refusing to play those roles means disappointing people who benefit from your silence. It means setting boundaries where none existed before. It might mean not showing up to gatherings that always end in conflict, or deciding that your mental health matters more than family expectations. It's not easy. You may be called disrespectful, distant, or even selfish. But none of those labels are true. What you're actually doing is refusing to pass down pain disguised as loyalty. Changing the script often brings backlash. When you start acting differently, choosing calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, people may try to pull you back into the old pattern. They'll provoke you, guilt you, and remind you of who you used to be. That's because your growth threatens their comfort. They know how to engage with the version of you that stayed quiet and played along. But they don't know how to deal with the version of you that now sets limits and demands respect. It takes strength to hold your ground when others want to keep playing the same emotional games. It's tempting to slip back into old habits, to apologize just to smooth things over, or to ignore your own needs for the sake of temporary peace, but each time you do that, you abandon a part of yourself. Real change means staying grounded in your truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're the only one in your family doing the work to break the cycle. Healing is not about being perfect, it's about being aware. It's about recognizing where the dysfunction begins and refusing to carry it forward. You may stumble, you may second, guess yourself, but that doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're human. What matters is your commitment to something better, not just for you, but for anyone who comes after you. You are choosing to end patterns, not repeat them, and that is an act of generational courage. You won't always be understood. You may even feel isolated at times, but the peace that comes with living in alignment with your values is worth every moment of discomfort. You're not disrespecting your family by refusing to inherit their pain. You're honoring them by choosing healing over harm, clarity over confusion, and love over fear. In doing so, you become the turning point. You are not breaking the family, you're breaking the cycle. You don't owe toxic relatives access to your life. Just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they automatically have a place in your personal space. Relationships should be earned through respect, trust, and consistency, not granted simply because of genetics. When a relative continuously disrespects your boundaries, drains your energy, or brings emotional chaos into your life, you have every right to step back. Protecting yourself is not betrayal, it's survival. It's choosing your mental and emotional health over someone else's expectations. There is often pressure in families to maintain ties no matter what. You'll hear phrases like, "but they're your father," or "family is everything," as if that alone justifies poor treatment. But a title doesn't excuse abuse. Being a parent, sibling, or cousin doesn't give someone the right to mistreat you. Love should not hurt. If a relationship causes you pain more often than peace, that's not love, that's dysfunction. And continuing to allow someone who harms you to remain close only gives them more opportunities to do damage. Limiting or cutting off contact with a toxic relative is one of the hardest decisions you might make, especially if you've been taught to value family above all else. It can bring guilt, self-doubt, and even backlash from other relatives who don't understand your choice. But you are not responsible for making others comfortable at the expense of your own well-being. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to uphold the illusion of a united family. Real unity is built on respect, not obligation. Creating distance doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as not answering the phone, not attending gatherings, or being polite but firm in your conversations. You don't owe anyone a long explanation for why you're choosing peace. Silence can be a powerful boundary. Your energy is valuable, and you have the right to decide who gets access to it. If someone consistently takes more than they give, disrespects your time, or causes emotional harm, it is okay to say no more. You may worry about what others will think or say about your decision. Let them talk. You don't have to live in the stories they create. People will always have opinions, especially when they're not the ones enduring the behavior. What matters most is how you feel. If stepping away brings you clarity, peace, and healing, then it was the right move. You are not selfish for protecting yourself. You are wise for recognizing what no longer serves your growth. Sometimes distance is what gives you the space to heal. It allows you to reflect, rebuild your confidence, and reconnect with who you are outside of toxic dynamics. In that space, you might also realize how much of your energy was being consumed by trying to fix something that wasn't yours to fix. Some relationships are only healthy from a distance, and that's okay. You can still wish someone well, forgive them internally, and move forward without ever inviting them back into your life. In the end, the people who truly love you will want to see you at peace. They will respect your boundaries and be willing to meet you in the middle. The rest will fall away, and that loss is often a blessing in disguise. You don't owe toxic relatives a seat at your table just because of shared history. What you owe is to yourself, a life filled with honesty, respect, and emotional safety. Choosing who gets to stay in your life isn't about revenge. It's about protection, and you are worth protecting. You break generational dysfunction by refusing to play the old games. These games are often passed down like heirlooms, wrapped in tradition, guilt, and silence. They can look like avoidance, denial, manipulation, or emotional neglect, all under the banner of "this is how our family does things." But just because something is familiar doesn't make it right. Dysfunction becomes a cycle when it's accepted without question. The moment you start asking why things are the way they are, you begin to challenge a system that's long gone unchecked. Refusing to participate doesn't mean you're trying to hurt your family. It means you're trying to heal. It means you've recognized that something isn't working and you're choosing not to repeat it. Maybe it's the yelling matches that solve nothing. Maybe it's the expectation that you put everyone else first, even when it destroys you. Maybe it's pretending everything's fine just to keep up appearances. Whatever it is, choosing not to play along is often seen as rebellion, but in truth, it's responsibility. You're not just protecting yourself, you're choosing a better path for future generations. It's rarely welcomed when you stop reacting the way you used to, when you start responding with calm, with boundaries, with clarity. It throws people off. They accuse you of changing, of being cold, of not caring. But what they're really reacting to is the loss of control. The old game required your compliance, and now you're no longer following the script. That makes people uncomfortable, especially those who benefit from keeping things exactly as they've always been. Your growth disrupts the comfort of their dysfunction. There's a weight to being the one who sees the problem first. You feel isolated, even guilty, like you're betraying your family by seeing them clearly. But awareness is not betrayal. Silence is. By pretending nothing's wrong, the cycle continues. When you name what's broken, you create space for something better. You give yourself permission to feel, to question, to step away if necessary. And while that choice might come with discomfort, it also brings freedom, the kind of freedom that allows healing to begin. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean fixing everyone else. It means refusing to continue patterns that damage you. It's not your job to change others, only to take responsibility for yourself. That might look like walking away from arguments instead of engaging. It might mean refusing to cover up someone else's behavior just to keep the peace. It could mean choosing therapy, setting boundaries, or simply saying no. These choices are not selfish. They are how cycles break, quietly, steadily, with intention. You may feel pressure to go back to how things were. You'll be tempted to explain yourself, to defend your boundaries, to soften your truth. But the old way didn't work for you, and you don't need to go back to what broke you just to make others feel comfortable. The healing you choose now may not be visible right away, but it lays the groundwork for a future that doesn't carry the same pain forward. It makes space for more honest, respectful, and loving connections. In time, your choice to stop playing the old games might inspire others to do the same, but even if it doesn't, even if you stand alone, you will know that you chose peace over patterns, you chose clarity over confusion. And you chose to be a turning point, not a continuation. That is the quiet power of breaking the cycle. You don't have to carry what was never yours to hold. You're not just rewriting your story. You're changing the legacy. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. Love is not a permission slip for others to mistreat you, and it certainly doesn't mean sacrificing your mental and emotional well-being to maintain a relationship. Too often, people confuse love with tolerance, thinking that if they truly care about someone, they must endure the pain that person causes. But love without boundaries is not healthy. It becomes a one, sided arrangement where your needs, feelings, and limits are constantly disregarded. Choosing to protect yourself does not make your love less real, it makes it more self-respecting. There is a difference between loving someone and allowing them full access to your life. Just because your feelings for them are genuine doesn't mean they get to speak to you however they want or cross your boundaries whenever it suits them. You can care deeply for a parent, a sibling, or a partner and still say, "This behavior is not okay." Protecting yourself is not a betrayal of love. It's an act of self-love. You are allowed to choose peace over chaos, even if that chaos comes from someone you care about. Sometimes the people we love the most are also the ones who hurt us the deepest. And that can be incredibly difficult to reconcile. You remember the good moments, the shared memories, the hopes you had for that relationship. It's painful to admit that love alone isn't enough to make things work. But love without respect becomes damaging. It can become a cycle of hurt, apology, and repeat. And each time you allow that cycle to continue, you send a message that your boundaries are flexible, your needs are optional, and your pain is acceptable. Choosing to protect yourself may mean stepping back, limiting contact, or creating emotional distance. That decision can come with guilt, especially if you've been raised to believe that family or love requires unconditional access. But the truth is, unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance of unhealthy behavior. You can wish someone well from afar. You can pray for their healing, hold compassion in your heart, and still recognize that they are not safe to be close to. This kind of choice doesn't always make sense to others. People might question you, pressure you to just forgive, or suggest that you're being too harsh, but they don't live your life. They don't carry the weight of those difficult conversations or the emotional toll those relationships take. Only you know what peace costs you, and only you can decide whether keeping someone close is worth that price. You are the one who has to live with your mental and emotional state every day. It's also important to remember that boundaries are not ultimatums. They're not about punishment or revenge. They're about protecting your energy, your sanity, and your sense of self. They're about saying, "I love you, but I also love myself enough to step back when this relationship becomes harmful." In doing so, you create space for healing, both yours and theirs. Sometimes distance is the only way to break the cycle and allow the possibility of a healthier connection in the future. At the end of the day, protecting yourself doesn't mean you've stopped loving them. It means you've stopped abandoning yourself, and that's a powerful shift. It means you've realized that your well-being matters, that your peace is worth preserving, and that love should never come at the expense of your health. You can hold love in your heart and still walk away. You can care and still say no. You can love someone and still choose yourself.